Okay, it is 6:30. We will bring the Tuesday, September 17th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting to order. Note that we have a full complement of the board here, so we do have a quorum. And I guess our first item, Jan, you want to do the introduction?
Good evening. Thank you to everyone who's here, to our Planning Commission and our applicants and our staff. I have the pleasure of introducing Loretta Daniel. Do you want to join me, Loretta, or stand up and wave or something? Loretta has joined us as our new Long-Range Planning Program Manager. Comes to us most recently from the city of Arvada, where she's been for several years. Was with City of Aurora for 10 years before that, worked with Jason actually in Castle Rock before that, and had private practice experience before she came to Colorado, before she moved to Colorado. So welcome, Loretta.
Well, thank you.
Welcome.
So excited to have you. And if you want to introduce yourselves, you can shake hands and say hello. And in the meantime, I'm just going to make a quick announcement. You have a flyer in front of you. We are having an open house on October 3rd that is focused on the East County and East County citizens. So things that they might be interested in, either learning about or giving us input on as to what they would like to see done maybe differently in the East County. We started out with this as having a focus on zoning issues, things like home-based businesses or small businesses, or problems we're running into with the use of agricultural affidavits, things like that, potential new businesses that could be out there. But since then, we've kind of expanded that. So there will also be additional divisions from Public Works there. And there will also be additional departments there. So not a huge gathering, not really like a whole county-wide system, but some selected departments that we feel like could use some communications in the East County. So I hope that you can join us if you have the time to do that. And otherwise, we will send this out to you by email as well. We'll also notify the Eastern Arapahoe County Advisory Planning Committee members. Board of Adjustment members will be sending it out to REAP, the I-70 Corridor Chamber of Commerce, some of our oil and gas stakeholders that we're meeting with currently in the East County, some of the other agencies. So just wanted to make sure that you knew about that. You might see an article on that in the I-70 Scout. I'm not quite sure yet. But we'll also be using social media to promote this. So thank you, and I'll let you get started with your
Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is consideration of the minutes from Tuesday, August 20th. Any corrections, modifications?
I have one correction to make to the minutes.
Very good.
It is the fourth paragraph on page 2, beginning with Brody Smith, applicant, summarize the questions that had come up at the prior hearing and the additional and/or clarified information requested and that provided. That should read that provided the basis.
Okay, we have one grammatical correction made by Mrs. Woolman to the minutes. Any other corrections or comments? And may we have a motion for approval?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Lathis.
I move to approve the minutes as amended.
All those in favor?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Mrs. Woolman seconded the motion made by Mrs. Lathis and has passed unanimously. Our item number 1 tonight is case number SD 19-001, Prosper Metropolitan District numbers 1 through 4 service plan. And Mr. Skinner will present for the county.
Thank you. Not what I was going.
Can't find it on here. Too much.
Start arts on my phone. This is crazy.
Bill, do you have a system for organizing all that?
Unfortunately, when I move it off my huge monitors at my desk and bring it here, it'll go. Plug it back in and it'll go straight. I'm just going to forgo the graphic. So what we have tonight is Prosper Metropolitan District's service plan. It discusses the financing and how the service plans work for the Prosper Communities Metropolitan District. Prosper, I should explain briefly for anyone who doesn't know, is the very large community. It's on the horizon just south of the interchange of Watkins Road and Interstate 70 out on what the staff refers to as the Eastern Plains because it sounds majestic. Something of note with the service plan. This is an amendment. The service plan was originally approved in 2014, I believe. What the applicant is going to come up and discuss and explain is they would like to increase the overall number of individual districts they can have inside the bounds of the existing financial mechanism for the plan. Bringing that down another level, they're not tampering with how the Prosper community is financed, the limits of debts they can incur, or how they have to pay that back. They're simply taking a small number of districts and breaking that into the ability to have a larger number of districts that they will redefine at a later date so they can focus funds on specific areas instead of trying to say, well, the improvement's here, but the district has to be very large and we'll add more in later. Trust me, they explain it better than I do. I fully grasp what they're telling us and have been through it. Also had county's legal assistance on board. We've had an independent financial consultant look at this just to make sure that we do understand what's happening and we're comfortable with this. Tonight, after the explanation and questions, we'll ask the Planning Commission for a recommendation. This will go on to the board for the yes, no, approve, deny determination. I don't think I have anything else to add unless you want to bring me back after you've heard Prosper's description of this. Would you like to move on to that?
Yes. Sure.
Okay. He's going to set up something that works for him.
All right. Okay. I might have to bring this down a couple of feet. Can you hear me okay? Okay, so for the record, my name is Marianne McGeady with McGeady Becker. We represent the metropolitan districts that are requesting amendments to their service plan and also the applicant that is requesting approval of the service plans for the organization of the new districts. So let's see. Yes, I was able to click. So we have here just an overview of the development. I'm assuming you're generally familiar, but in the event a refresher is helpful. The project itself is about 5,144 acres overall, so it is a huge development. The anticipated development is high quality, mixed use, bounded by I-70, Hazelmont Road, Imboden Road, Mississippi Avenue. So are there any questions about the location or the parameters of the project? They're looking for about 8 million square feet of commercial development to occur out there pursuant to the current zoning. and approximately 9,000 residential units, 1,500 low density, 5,100 medium density, and 1,100 high density. So again, just to give you a flavor for what amount of development is anticipated to occur here. The purpose of metropolitan districts, again, generally, is to be sure you have the ability to do public financing of the public infrastructure, and then also entities in place to maintain those improvements that are not going to be dedicated for operations and maintenance to the county or another jurisdiction. Out in this area, there's not a lot of other service providers, and so without these metropolitan districts, there wouldn't be service there to support the development in the future. So again, the districts do issue tax-exempt bonds, and their goal is to finance that public infrastructure over a long period of time so that the impact of paying for it on any particular home when it's acquired isn't overwhelming. Districts are quasi-municipal corporations and political subdivisions of the state. What that means is that they are governments. They have to be governed by open meeting laws, so their board meetings are all posted in public. They have Open Records Act compliance, so all of their records are subject to the open records requests, and they have to publicly bid their construction projects and have compliance with government procurement requirements. Is there any question about any of that? Okay, so generally that's what these entities are. They have boards of directors initially populated by nominees of the developer because it's vacant land and there isn't anyone else out there. Once the development begins to grow, there'll be residents that will move in and will then vote to who their representatives would be on the board. The bonds that are issued are not debt of the county or any other jurisdiction other than the entities that pledge to repay them. And all the powers and authority granted by Title 32 are limited somewhat in the service plans. So we do have multiple districts here already, 4 that are proposed for amendment today. Their service plans today would be Metro Districts 1, 2, 3, and 4. They were organized in 2015 following approval by the Board of County Commissioners. Having multiple districts, metropolitan districts, helps to define the financing that separates itself by the type of product type. So you have residential separated from commercial frequently, and also different kinds of residential separated into different districts. Part of it is also timing. Because of the large development area here, this project is going to develop over a long period of time. And so to be sure that there's entities there to finance all the way to the last phase of public infrastructure, we need to have more districts. So that's our thought there. Okay. Well, we didn't get the image. I'm sorry. We tried. My apologies. It looks like you each have a map in front of you from the staff report. And what that image is that you're looking at, I'm sorry it's not up on the screen, but in front of you, is of what the district's boundaries are now. And let me grab one so I can be looking at what you're looking at. Okay, so the red area is currently the boundaries of District 2. Gonna have to dive in here. Wow, I don't think I can read this, but okay, so District 2 is definitely the red. The brown on the outside rim, that kind of lighter brown, is one of the districts. The yellow would be another one of the districts, and those are District 1, 2, 3, and 4. That mushroomy area that is the largest parcel within, actually 2 parcels within what you're looking at, is the future inclusion area. So that's property that would be included into one of those 4 districts, but one of the new districts, 5 through 10, that would be organized if the service plans are approved by the Board of County Commissioners. And we're looking for your recommendation for that approval today. So as the development occurs, you would have those areas that look kind of mushroomy in color today, including within the boundaries of either the red district, the golden colored district, the brownish district, and the dark brown district. Are there any questions about that? And then and then also potentially into one of the new districts if they're approved. Okay, I have up on the screen an update on what the mill levy cap is, because in 2014, when the 50 mil debt mill levy cap was approved for the districts, the assessment ratio was 7.96, and since we now have a 7.20 assessment ratio, that number's been Gallagher adjusted. So to be sure we're all tracking with the same number, it's now 55.664. Are there any questions about that? Okay, and so we're not asking to increase that debt mill levy cap, not for the districts in their amendment and not for the new districts. It would be the same cap. The other point I want to make is these metro districts don't overlap. They are all side by side. So there would not be adding the 255s together for more than that cap. Okay? Okay, and we're also, as was noted in the staff presentation, there's no request to increase the debt limit, so all of these 10 districts would share the same debt limit. So having additional districts doesn't increase the total amount of authorization for debt they would have on this total service area. Are there any questions about that? Okay. And I think that's all I had, other than one other point. There are other districts that serve this area that were organized at the time the original 4 metro districts were organized. Once we, if we get the approval on these service plan amendments and the organization of the new districts, we'll be back to present conforming amendments for those districts. And those districts are not metro districts like this, but they do serve this area. So in their service plans, they do reference the fact that these other districts exist and that they're going to work together. So we want to have their service plans read the same way. So we thought maybe let's get these districts sorted out and find out what's going to get approved, and then we bring the conforming changes through for the other districts. Any questions about that? So I'm sorry.
I just want to make sure I understand. So
Yes, ma'am.
the original districts that were approved in 2014, if the we and the county commissioners approve this, it's like starting over, or does any of that carry through?
The original 4 metro districts would have a service plan amendment, so they already exist. They would continue to exist, but their plans would be changed to be the same as the 5 new districts. So they would all have the same language in their service plans. They would have the same mill levy caps. They'd have the same debt authorization and the same references to the fact that they'd work together to serve this area. Is that responsive to your question?
Right.
Okay.
But
do you have another question?
Original 8, it won't work with what was approved previously. You have to have these additional 6.
Good question. The reason we're asking for the additional and the reason we're concerned it might not work is because we have such a large development area that's going to absorb over a long period of time. And I think we had thought that the 4 would be sufficient, and our concern now is that it wouldn't be. And we're concerned to get too far into the development without having the plan and structure be very clear. We don't have any residents living in the community yet. We want to be sure that all of the entities that are going to exist to serve the whole community exist before the first resident moves in. So that is, if anybody has questions, we can show them the whole structure. Yes, ma'am.
So is the intent then to, basically phase this development in smaller slices? So this gives you the opportunities to do smaller pieces at a time with the additional metro districts, whereas these would force you to develop more land than potentially you need at a given time and place.
That is one of the possibilities, yes. But I do want to be clear, the districts will still work together, so they won't be standalone districts. It is one community, and we want to have them work together. And again, that's the other reason why we want to have them all in place at the beginning, because we don't want to have people move in and think there's 4, and then we come back and change it to 10, and then the change is not good in that circumstance. You want people to understand in the beginning what you have and how it works. But yes, it gives the opportunity for phasing.
Thank you.
Certainly.
How long are you looking for your bonding period? I mean, obviously, you're projecting in the future, right?
Correct.
You have $1 billion cap that you can essentially, if you wanted to borrow up to $1 billion, okay? Which you're not going to do all at once. I mean, I recognize that, but I was curious as to. I mean, even when your bonding is staggered, which apparently it would be because
Correct.
It's a long phase build out. I mean, think of Highlands Ranch, okay? And this community is about half the size it's projected to be of what Highlands Ranch is. in terms of overall number of residents. Okay, I'm not even talking about the commercial properties. But I was curious, like, are you looking for 30-year bonding, or because you're going to need long-term?
Yeah, it's a good question. And comparing to Highlands Ranch, although Highlands Ranch is about 25,000 acres, so people sometimes don't realize how huge that is. But it started, I think, somewhere around between 76 and 79, I think, is when Highlands Ranch started. And it's still building out. And we're in 2019. Somebody better than I at math will have to say how many years that is. But each phase of bonds or each series of bonds would probably be 30-year bonds because that's what's in the market right now, would be my guess. But they would only be issued when there's credit capacity to support the repayment. So to answer your question, it will bonds would be issued when there was credit capacity to support them. Each amortization schedule will be anticipated to be 30 years, but how long it takes to put in all the infrastructure and pay it all off, we have, one presentation on how that could occur in the financing plan attached to the service plans, and they all are the same, again, because they're working together to do that. But I couldn't guess beyond what's projected there.
I mean, because obviously our concern is the overall debt load. I mean, a certain percentage is guaranteed by the builder and the structures that are being built and everything else. But, we all know housing cycles come and go. So I know metro districts, I remember back in the day, obviously the laws have changed. But I remember back in the day when all the metro districts went under. Okay,
Yeah.
I mean, I remember.
I remember it
that.
too.
There you go.
I was right in the front row seat for
Yeah.
some of that.
Yeah.
And I was appointed to represent the Colorado Housing Council. They created a special district task force when there were unlimited mill levy bonds. And they were having issues, and some districts, we walked side by side them till they could restructure their debt. Others we represented because they were clients of ours that had to work through that debt. And as you mentioned, those statute changes in 1992 with the mill levy caps have changed significantly where the risk is in that recessionary cycle. No one can tell you there's not going to be another recessionary cycle. There will be one. We just don't know what year it will be. But over time, those bonds from the restructurings got paid off, and these bonds will get paid off too.
Right.
But this time, and I appreciate you bringing it up, there is a mill levy cap, and the risk to who lives there is that they will never pay more than that debt mill levy cap for that debt. So it's not like the unlimited mill levy time. Right, and just for reference, bankruptcy for special districts does not eliminate your debt. It creates this platform that you can negotiate with your creditors, but you can't cram down. And so it was beneficial when those restructurings happened to be able to communicate with bondholders to restructure, but bankruptcy doesn't mean your debt goes away. You do have to pay it.
But the effect of it at that time was that you only had partial bills of what your necessary infrastructure would be, okay? And I'm sure you remember that too. You go into a community and half the stuff would be, it almost was if construction stopped because no one was getting paid. So you had streets and curves that kind of just stopped in the middle and didn't really supply the needs of the community. And
well, my comment on that would be, and I don't know how to address a hypothetical situation, but understanding where we are today is that for the county, you have regulations in place that if public infrastructure is going to be built, there's subdivision improvement agreements that go with plats, and there's collateral and security that you require for that. We come in on behalf of these districts. If we've issued bonds and we have cash in the bank, we'll come in and say, hey, can we get a release from that LOC requirement because we've got cash to build, and sometimes you say yes and sometimes your people say no. But that's to make sure you don't have a situation where you've got a community that's not built. Again, I would say in recessionary cycles, things are going to slow down because what's secured is going to get built. What's not secured is going to have to wait for that next cycle. And that would happen whether the districts were here or not.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, look, Highlands Ranch was a really successful development. As you said, it's huge. So the prospects for Prospect look like it's feasible to have this structure in place to do the necessary builds that are required. So essentially, the county is not in a situation where the county could go out and just
build that themselves, because then all of us would be paying for all of the development of that community. But it's the risk factor that was concerning to me.
Sure. Have I addressed your
Yes.
concerns on that? Okay. Thank you. I think there's one other thing. Obviously, I want to ask you to consider approving and giving a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners to approve the application we have in front of you. There is a condition from the staff, and we're still working through the language on that. So, and we're not opposed to the substance of what's in that condition. The idea that there's a review of the absorption and the feasibility, we're not in objection to that. We're still working with the staff on the language. So we just wanted to bring that to your attention.
What is the status of the 1041? Is that was not approved back in 14?
I'm not sure I understand.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Vogel with Vogel & Associates. We're the land planners. Yeah, the 1041 was approved. Just as it's been a little while, but in 2015, the preliminary development plan, the 1041 for new communities was approved. And the districts that Ms. McGeady was just talking about were all approved concurrently in February 2015. Since then, there's been a final development plan that's been approved and a preliminary plat for phase 1 that's been approved as well, along with location expense plans for the large treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant.
So none of those will be coming back with changes?
No.
Okay.
No, the master plan in terms of land uses, all those things, everything in the 1041, the final plat, the preliminary plat, all that stuff remains the same. There's no changes to the plan.
Okay. I mean, do you anticipate in the next 5 years that you'll have to come back? I realize it's hard to predict. But I've seen service plans that were done like in the early 70s, and they still are fine today. So I'm trying to understand what has changed.
You've given me such a flat ball that I can hit right out of the park. The service plans that were done during that time are very different than the plans today, and I would love to go back and do plans like that, but your staff won't let me. So they want more detail, which is great, and we provide that detail, but when things change a little bit this way or that way, we have to come back. So we do try really hard to vision what the future will require and to have the plans be as flexible as they can be while still providing enough information that your staff is comfortable recommending approval. So yeah, no, those 70s plans were really great.
Sweet, right?
Yeah, but we will be back before you, not on these metropolitan districts, but on the other districts that serve the community, again, to make conforming changes. So if all goes well, we should be before you again maybe one more time before the end of the year or the beginning of next year.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. I guess we'll open the public hearing if anybody is here and wishes to speak. Do we have a sign-in? I don't think I see any. Yes. Everybody who is here should be here. Okay. Commissioner Mrs. Zero. Okay. All right. We have no one signed in, and if no one wishes to come forward, we will close the public hearing and bring it back for consideration. Mr. Skinner, do you have any other comments you wish to make?
No, Commissioners, I do not.
Okay. Are there any?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Mrs. Lasses?
In the case of SD 19-001, Prosper Metropolitan District Service Plan Amendment, I have reviewed the staff report, including all exhibits and attachments, and have listened to the applicant's presentation and any public comment as presented at the hearing, and hereby move to recommend approval of this application based on the findings in the staff report, subject to conditions 1 and 2.
We have a second for the motion by Mrs. Lasses.
I second, Madam Chair.
Mrs. Woolman has seconded the motion. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, Then we will move on to our study session items. And Mr. Reynolds will bring us up to date. So I wanted to ask you a quick question, but while I was thinking of it, I heard that the county turned down the Valley Country Club, and they now are actively trying to annex to the city of Aurora. Did they come to you a long time ago?
They did come to us a long time ago for a pre-application meeting. We spoke to some of the leadership of the country club, what they're proposing to do. I can show you, since this is not a quasi-judicial application within the county.
Okay. Well, I think it's caused some controversy, but you might have figured that out.
So the Valley Country Club is located sort of near the northwest corner of Parker and Arapahoe. You can see this area just south of Cherry Creek Reservoir State Park. And the area in question is sandwiched between Aurora and Centennial. You can see this row of homes in Centennial backs right up to the country club. And what the country club is proposing is, this is not an exact shape, I'll just draw a rectangle here, is to annex something like that amount of property into the city of Aurora and develop it as sort of a mixed-use zoning district. We had spoken to them, and this is in an area of the Centennial Airport influence area. Actually, a fair number of flights go along Arapahoe Road when they're doing sort of visual navigation. So airport noise is a factor here, and in our code, that really discourages residential use, and one of the components they were seeking was multifamily. And we said that, we could probably support commercial, office, something non-residential in that area, but they wanted to make sure they had multifamily as an option, and it sounds like maybe Aurora is willing to offer that as an option. So that's the status on that one.
So, Jason, I have a question. An email went around in the neighborhood. I think this happens occasionally. And I'm wondering if you're going to talk tonight about these you've asked for public comment on required meetings before, plans move forward.
Right.
And are you
neighborhood outreach meetings? That's
are you going to talk
part of the presentation tonight, but I'm happy to talk about it.
Oh, good. Yeah. Well, I'm just curious because they're asking for comments from all the neighbors, and they're raising Waffle House as an example, and I just wanted to
So
understand a little more.
You could call this the Waffle House Code Amendment, although there were some other cases where staff advised people that they really ought to reach out to the neighborhood before they submit their application to the county. And they elected not to, and it resulted in rough public hearings and sometimes in denial, as happened with Waffle House. I was a little disappointed that they testified here at Planning Commission that they were following staff's recommendation not to have a neighborhood meeting. When actually we emphasized several times that they should be reaching out to the neighbors before applying with us. Yeah, they might not have heard the word, or you should have a meeting, you should not have a meeting. It's easy to misunderstand if the planner's mumbling.
Or you really don't want to have a meeting.
Right. So the proposed code amendment for certain types of land use cases would require neighborhood meetings if it ends up being adopted by the county. It actually is kind of a review of other jurisdictions. It's fairly standard to require a neighborhood meeting for certain land use cases, typically rezonings, planned unit developments, and at least in the draft, we're considering allowing staff discretion to require one.
Okay, so you can put that in the code.
Yes, provided it gets adopted that way, but it still has to go out through public review. So we're starting with sort of, we're sending out to homeowners associations, development community.
Okay. Thank you.
Though I don't think we sent it to Lass's Custom Homes.
Yeah, I said, missed the memo on that. But as someone who lives close to Diane,
Yes.
in a similar neighborhood
Yes.
that no longer has an HOA, how will the county handle that if there's no organized, because we have that kind of unusual super HOA situation, with force per mile. So how would that, if you adopt that kind of rule, how does that work when you've got kind of that loosey-goosey organization thing going on?
Right. It is. One jurisdiction that has something like this is Aurora. City of Aurora actually has sort of a neighborhood organization registration page, and they keep that up to date, and they really encourage people to register. We don't have something like that. I mean, we try to keep up with HOAs, and the ones that are sort of loosely organized, we would have to notify basically by a notification radius to property owners. I don't think Right. No, but it's a mailing. Like, for example, the city of Littleton requires a notice to everybody who owns property within 750 feet of the site, which, along Uinta Way would capture a lot of people.
Right.
Yeah. So that's that update. And I think Commissioner Woolman had mentioned the some of the fiascos with Metro Districts and the savings and loans from the 80s. I worked in Castle Rock for 12 years, and there was a great example of that. If you're ever driving down I-25 on the west side by Crystal Valley Parkway is Dawson Ridge, where they constructed literally miles of arterial streets and water tower or water storage. And when I moved to Colorado in 2002, it looked much like this, probably with a little less soil heave. I did get to drive out there a couple of times, and the time has not been kind to that infrastructure from the 80s, and to date it still has not developed.
Yeah, I work for Resolution Trust Corporation.
Okay.
So we owned a lot of metro districts that kind of look like that.
Castle Pines.
Well, look, the meadows, we own the meadows too,
Right.
but the meadows got developed really well. So there's examples in both categories, success and failure all around.
Yeah, I think the developer of the Meadows was fond of saying they were the third developer of the Meadows. The first two went bankrupt or ended up not existing anymore. So, what I was going to offer this evening was a quick overview of the new land development code, and I have codes to hand out.
Will you take this when you give us a code?
I will take them. Yeah.
Oh, good.
You won't get binders.
Good.
We're gonna forward them onto the board.
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I like that.
So these are no longer
give you-
the draft version.
I didn't give you, this stuff? Okay.
Well,
Sorry. Yeah,
Hang on to your development application
Right.
manual for now.
right. Because I have the old code too, so somewhere in my house. It's in my office. Yeah.
I will try to make sure that my dog doesn't
Chew on it.
away it ate the last one.
Yeah. You can always download it on the website if
But thank
you
you.
are dog resistant.
Yes, exactly.
You gotta drop a brick.
Ate the,
Dog eats.
the other one.
Yeah.
I don't think it likes plastic.
Yeah, but you can never tell. You can never tell.
Right.
They
So,
develop a taste.
this is the published version of the code. You previously had ones that were draft versions, and there weren't any major changes. We found a few typos, and changed the date at the bottom of the code to say August 15th which is the actual adoption date of the code or effective date of the code. As
The old one is null and void at this point. Get rid of it.
you may, if you wish. The one chapter that might be worthwhile to hang on to are the obsolete zone districts from the old code, because those remain in effect and will continue to be in effect. However, this body doesn't necessarily see those very much, because couldn't change your zoning to one of those obsolete zone districts. So mostly what you would be looking at is someone who wanted to take an obsolete zone district and rezone it to something else. But it might be worthwhile for reference because some of you may live in those obsolete zone districts like R3, R2.
Or have them in your neighborhood.
Right. So it's handy reference for the setbacks in that area and the height limitations. So the code is divided, we went over this during the adoption, into 7 chapters. It starts with general provisions, which sort of is the organizing chapter of the code and provides rules for interpretation of the language. Then you move into chapter 2, the zoning districts, which describes sort of the purpose for each district and links them to the comprehensive plan. How do these districts function? What are they intended to do? And then permitted uses is sort of the meat and bones for zoning, is what uses can you do in each of those districts. And one thing that we really like about the new code is that if somebody says, I want to do a car wash, now we can just look at the car wash line in the table and read across the table. Previously, we would have had to look through 7 to 8 chapters to look for the words car wash. So we were able to consolidate that into one table. It's a really big table. But it's much better than what we had. And chapter 4 moves into the, okay, I know what I can do. I know what the zone district is. How exactly do I do this thing? How big does the lot have to be? What are my setbacks? What's the height limitation? What are the rules for landscaping and parking and lighting? That's all found in chapter 4, which is a pretty thick chapter. Chapter 5 is procedures, which I think at the presentation I had talked about, there's a chart in chapter 5 that if we only did one thing, it would be that chart, because that consolidated a lot of procedural information that was also scattered throughout many chapters of the code into a single place, and it's very clear what the process is for any given case. You just read across the row. It tells you if you go to Planning Commission and if you go to the Board of County Commissioners and what sort of public notice do you have to do for those hearings. Chapter 6 is enforcement, which is something that our zoning division tends to use a lot. And then finally, Chapter 7 is all of our definitions. And tonight, I wanted to just sort of focus on procedures because that's where the Planning Commission interacts the most with the code. And it's page 237. Or if you just flip to tab 5, because we added tabs to this version of the code, the table's the first thing there. I just wanted to sort of go through and let you know about the different kinds of cases in this table that you're likely to see. So, first up, text amendments. These are changes to the words that are in the land development code. You act as a recommending body for those sorts of cases. And if you look at the slide on the screen, wherever the Planning Commission is a recommending body, it's in red, and wherever you're the final decision maker, it's in sort of that slate color. Zoning map amendments or rezonings are also one where the Planning Commission acts as a recommending body and Board of County Commissioners is the final decision maker. Planned unit developments, and I've got a couple of slides where I'll go into detail on these, but there's basically 2 types of cases that have public hearings. There's a general development plan, which establishes the initial zoning for certain types of PUDs. There's also a specific development plan, which establishes the initial zoning for certain types of PUDs. Both of those, the Planning Commission makes a recommendation and the board makes the final decision, because those are establishing zoning, which under state statute the board has to do. The specific development plan in a 3-step PUD process. So first you would do that general development plan, then you come back and do the specific development plan as a developer. That stops with the Planning Commission. You're the deciding body for that type of case. And we've had a couple of examples of those lately. I think at the last meeting there was a specific development plan, the one where Thrive Home Builders wanted to make some modifications to a previous approval. Waffle House was also a specific development plan. And that was actually a great test case for our process because it was a decision by the Planning Commission.
the applicant requested an appeal to the Board of County Commissioners, and the Board of County Commissioners elected not to hear that appeal. They said that the hearing here was fine and that the Planning Commission made a good decision. Or they decided they didn't want to hear an appeal, which is entirely within their purview. They may do that.
Jason, on page 5238 at the very bottom, Title 32, the special districts, and then it says see Colorado. What does that mean?
See Colorado revised statutes. We don't actually, our land development code, and this was largely a reorganization, we didn't really have a chapter on how we process special districts, so we just follow the rules that are in the Colorado revised statutes.
All right. Look at Title 32. Okay.
Right. That's, and you got to see a little piece of that this evening. So,
yeah, I've got it.
Use by special reviews for private utility companies, those are things like maybe an oil and gas pipeline for a private utility. So Conoco wants to build a pipeline that would go through this process, and it goes here for a recommendation. That's the one exception to use by special reviews. Normally the Planning Commission doesn't see those. They go directly to the board, but in that particular case they would come here as well.
Solar facilities is another example.
Right. Utility scale solar would be one. There's about a 1 square mile solar facility north of Deer Trail that went to Planning Commission before being approved by the board. Administrative site plan reviews is something that until I really saw it in the chart, I may have missed in my first few reads of the code. Administrative site plans are detailed site plans that staff reviews and approves. It's really about, did they meet the setbacks? Are they meeting our lighting requirements? Did they plant enough trees? Are the parking lot drive aisles wide enough? It's a lot of technical information that's black and white, so these are fairly rare. I haven't seen one, and I doubt even someone who's been here 15 years is yeah, because it's usually pretty clear. Either you're meeting our code requirement or you're not. But this provides some due process if somebody really wanted to argue ADA parking space dimensions or something. A planned sign program is something that we haven't seen in at least 4 years. The Inverness planned sign program is the only one I know of, and it provides sort of unique signage within the Inverness development area. Finally, airport influence area waiver. This brings us back to Valley Country Club. I suppose they could have asked for a waiver to the airport influence area if they had decided to pursue zoning in Arapahoe County.
They didn't like their odds.
Right. So the plan development, it includes sort of 3 types of plans: a general development plan, a specific development plan, and an administrative site plan. And each of these is getting finer grained detail. And the first 2 are the ones that may have public hearings. And, the 2-step PUD process is intended for somebody who's got a fairly good idea of what they want to do in their planned unit development and have detailed plans to where they can kind of sketch out where the landscaping is going to be, for example. And that, the one you saw a few weeks ago was a good example of that. They pretty much knew how they were going to lay out the site. They just weren't giving us quite engineering level detail.
So was theirs a 2-step?
Yes, it was a 3-step process. They were doing the 2nd step in the 3-step process, which I can show here. So the general development plan and step 1 was done back in the early 2000s, an old plan development or preliminary development plan, PDP. Basically, in the old version of the code, a PDP equals GDP. So they had done this first step, so they were coming in to the Planning Commission for this 2nd step, and having gotten the approval from the Planning Commission, we will finalize their administrative site plan. There was no appeal on that one. The 2-step process, you can see these P's are the public hearings here at Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners, and then you're able to move into the administrative process. So Subdivisions are another thing that the Planning Commission will see. Preliminary plats, they act as sort of a rough draft for the final plat, and the final plat is the thing that actually carves up land into individual lots and streets and parcels and tracts for, like, for example, landscaping tracts at the entrance to a homeowner to a different development. Minor subdivisions, those are fairly limited plats. Basically, a minor subdivision kind of functions like both a preliminary and a final plat. So the Planning Commission makes a recommendation on it, and the board would approve it. Rural cluster subdivision is a special provision in our code that allows somebody to take a large agricultural area and do smaller lots. So they could do, maybe 2-acre lots or even smaller on a big piece of agricultural land while preserving the rest for agriculture. We have not seen very many of those. I think we saw one after adopting the ordinance. So at some point in the future, we want to revisit that and see what we maybe did wrong because nobody's applied for them in the last 10 years. Street name changes are also something we'll occasionally see. One thing about platting is that recently the state adopted a new statute that allows boards of county commissioners to delegate certain platting authorities to administrative officials, which is something we'll be discussing with the board. For example, on final plats, do they want to continue having public hearings for those, or do they want to delegate that to staff? I was confused coming from a home rule municipality to a county, and in the home rule municipality, staff just approved plats. It didn't need a public hearing in the one I worked in. Finally, there's the miscellaneous cases in this table. Administrative amendment appeal, this is probably pretty similar to an administrative site plan. Usually administrative amendments are used to make minor changes to a development plan, like a homeowners association wants to change their entry signage and landscaping or adjust the style of fence that goes around the perimeter of the property. It's usually not a huge change involving a lot of I suppose if they wanted to change their fence from a 6-foot fence to a 12-foot fence, that might require public hearings because that wouldn't necessarily meet our fence code. But changing it from one type of wood fence maybe to a Trex fence or something like that would be an administrative amendment. And there is also a procedure for appealing those. Comprehensive plan adoptions or amendments, which the second part of the study session touches on that a little bit. Under state law in counties, the Planning Commission adopts the comprehensive plan. They adopt sub-area plans, and they can also do amendments to those plans. And those are final action by the Planning Commission. I should have highlighted location and extent because it's final action by the Planning Commission as well. Those are applications by public entities. So like if a fire district wants to build a fire station, they would submit a location and extent for the county review. And they can do that in pretty much any zone district, and staff reviews it and brings it to the Planning Commission for a decision. 1041 permits are also known as areas and activities of state interest. Those types of applications are things like major utilities. Xcel Energy is putting in a bunch of power lines and they need to cross a portion of the county. That might be a 1041 permit. Or a major water project for someone's running a water pipeline across the county. Certificates of designation are, there's currently only one in the county, and that is for the landfill at Quincy and Gun Club. It's sort of a type of case that's sort of a very high level of scrutiny. It requires coordination with the State Department of Health, CDPHE, and as I said, we currently have only one in existence, although you may see one if it happens to if they happen to revise.
Disposal facilities like landfills, injection wells.
Right. And we do have an active injection well application for basically produced fluids that come out of oil and gas production that will likely end up at a public hearing here someday, or some month, I should say. Special districts, those refer back to the state statutes. The Planning Commission acts as a recommending body on those. And then finally, voided and de-annexed disconnected land. So Aurora annexes some property. Maybe they're not able to provide municipal services to that property, and the property owner decides they want to get out of Aurora. The Planning Commission could here sort of make decisions, make a recommendation regarding that land. Most likely what that would look like is really just a zoning application. So it's coming out of Aurora, it's coming into Arapahoe County, we have to zone it something. So those are all the types of cases that you're likely to see and some that you're highly unlikely to see just because they don't come up that much. Any questions on any of those? I mean,
Just wonderful.
Good. I mean, that chart is so handy.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would also be remiss if I didn't give credit to Clarion Associates, who really helped a lot with this reorganization.
Most of us gave them hard questions. Well, wait a minute.
You were the professor. It's not logically followed.
That's Alan White who did because he's working for us.
Yeah. No,
On the heels of the comprehensive plan.
And there is more to come. I mean, the part of this was, I think I said during the presentation, during the hearing, was that, we're trying to set up the good bones to actually put some, perhaps profound changes to our code into motion. And what we're looking at doing is our use table and our definitions is the next step. And the use table includes uses that are odd or outdated or perhaps a little too fine-grained because you have to decide, exactly what sort of, is it this type of use or that type of use? I think, we might get into that with service stations because there's like service stations, there's car washes, there's convenience stores. Maybe you could just have one category for that, and then if you're concerned about 24-hour uses, make that a development standard that someone has to meet. The other thing that happens in our code is if you look carefully at our use table and our definitions, you'll find things in the use table that are not necessarily defined, and you'll find things in the definitions that are not present in the use table but really look like they should be. So there's a fair amount of work to do there, and we're looking forward to that. All right.
yeah, I think this makes it very accessible.
The tabs really help too.
It's all about the tabs.
Just in defense, we had tabs in the old version.
Yeah.
But so many more tabs.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess that's it. We have one more.
Wait.
Yeah, it's
Oh.
this is
Yeah.
That slideshow. Oh. Let's see if we open your slideshow. There it is.
Okay.
Good evening, Commissioners.
I think I've met everyone here, but if I haven't, my name is Alan White. I work part-time in the department on special projects. My first special project was a comprehensive plan update that you adopted a year ago in January, if memory serves me correctly. One of the things about the comprehensive plan was that it took a lot of the text from the 2001 comprehensive plan that was prepared by Clarion Associates and just carried that over. So a lot of the definitions and descriptions of areas were not amended during that update process. One of the things that has become apparent to staff, and it's related to the slide that is up on the screen right now, is the provision of affordable housing in the county. And one of the aspects of creating affordable housing is density. So we're going to talk about density tonight. But first I wanted to give you a little background information. I don't know if the stars were aligning or if it was the full moon phase or whatever last week, but as we started talking about density, we had been asked to review the housing plan and a housing need assessments that was prepared by the Community Resources Department. That's something they need to do every 5 years to be eligible to receive Community Development Block Grant funds. I know I'm kind of getting into the weeds here, but it was sort of, we're looking at affordable housing, we're looking at densities, and here's a bunch of information that comes in these housing studies prepared by Community Resources. And it was really astonishing to me going through these reports and seeing some of the numbers that were presented in the report. This is just a background slide to give you an idea of what income levels are in the county. I know at least I think of, we've got Greenwood Village and Cherry Hills Village and parts of Centennial, and everybody's high income. Well, that's not necessarily true. Area median income is a measure that HUD uses and the Community Development Block Grant program uses to establish eligibility for certain types of programs, be it rental subsistence, rental subsidies, or grants for rehabbing homes. So this, I wanted to show this slide because the area median income for Arapahoe County is about $70,000, but 30% of area median income is close to $21,000. And just to put that in perspective, that's countywide, but for a renter, that's not quite $14,000. And if you're trying to rent an apartment in today's market and that's your income, you've got very few choices. This is a slide that shows how many households within the county are cost burdened. And what that means is that they're paying more than 30% of their income towards housing costs, which includes rent, utility payments, or rent or mortgage, utility payments, and taxes if it's not rolled into your mortgage, and all those costs that are associated with housing. And it's an issue, the reports conclude that it's an issue for many households who earn 80% or less of the area median income. So with those numbers in mind from the previous slide, there are a tremendous number of households in the county that are burdened by their housing costs. And the first bullet on the right-hand side of this screen emphasizes that the cost burden is really a burden for those households at 30% and 31 to 50% of area median income. Those are the numbers that I've highlighted in red in this chart. So total, I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on these slides, but I'm managing to do that. So there are a total of 16,000 potential renters that are cost burdened and 10,000 households, owner occupied households that are cost burdened. The consultants for the department did this analysis, and basically the message in the right-hand column here is that there's a deficit, quite staggering deficit of housing units within the various income ranges on the left side of the screen. Deficit of available housing units for these people to be able to afford. The studies concluded that a lack of housing units affordable to households affects all income levels. It's not just the very low income levels, but those that are just below area median income. So the second bullet lists the number of units that they estimate are lacking in the county by income level for rental units. One of the things that they found that affects the availability of rental units for various income levels is there are a lack of rental units for the higher income levels, more amenities, higher quality, if you will, units. So those people, rather than renting at this level, because there isn't anything available, go down to the next level, which forces all those people at that level, or not all of them, but some of them, to go down to the next level of affordable units, and so on down the line to where the ones at the very lowest level are kind of squeezed out of the whole market. And there's also a gap in home ownership. This is their analysis of what's available, not what's available, but the prices that one would need to pay to for a unit to be affordable, so you're not paying more than 30% of your income towards housing, and what the affordable price would be at those income levels. The interesting thing to note is the average housing price as of June 2019 in the county was $425,000. And if you look at the affordable price at those income levels, you're almost close at over 100%, but you're not quite there. We have, as I mentioned before, the text and the context of the comprehensive plan update was carried over from the 2001 comprehensive plan. We're seeing a lot of townhome development come into the county. You've seen several applications that are attached units, multifamily units, townhome units, and several of them have been right about at the 12-unit or above level. Some research we've done indicates that more typical townhome densities range up to 16 or even more units per acre. It kind of depends on what open space requirements are, landscaping requirements, guest parking, those kinds of site development standards also come into play. One of the recent examples that you saw, and it was dubbed a multifamily project, but it really looked more like a townhome project, and that was I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, Avir or a VERE project that was at 13.59 units per acre. That's more typically what we see in terms of townhome development. And also, I know you've all memorized the new land development code that was handed out to you tonight, but the R2B zone district is a townhome zone district. That's one of our new residential zone districts, and the upper density limit in that zone district is about 15 units to the acre. One other item I wanted to note, because I didn't want this discussion to be just about townhomes, but key informants, which included developers and home builders that were interviewed for the housing needs assessment, indicated that 8 units to the acre is kind of a magic threshold, below which affordable housing becomes very difficult to provide. So 8 units to the acre is what they would suggest as a density for recommending affordable single-family detached housing. So now to the crux of what we want to discuss tonight. What does all this mean? We have addressed in policies and strategies the provision of affordable housing. We talk about it as something that we should encourage, and there is a great need in the county. Obviously, the housing needs assessment shows that there is tremendous demand for affordable rental and for sale units in the county. We have seen, and I think we should continue to expect, an increase in the number of development proposals for multifamily townhome and small lot single-family developments. That's just how the housing market is evolving, not only in this along the Front Range, but in the country. So one of the things we've noticed in the comprehensive plan is that we've got a potential barrier to development of affordable townhome and single-family projects, and that is the land use descriptions that are contained in Chapter 3. These are the descriptions of urban residential and single-family detached and attached projects. So what it says is these type of uses include single-family detached, single-family attached, for example, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, townhomes, and row houses. And then secondarily, you can have neighborhood commercial centers with locally oriented shops, park rec facilities, etc. Characteristics that are laid out in the comprehensive plan are where we're getting kind of hung up with our goal of providing affordable housing. So the second bullet under that is that average gross density, average gross densities will vary depending upon what kind of project you're doing. For single-family detached, density will range from, right now it says 1 to 6 units per acre. For single-family attached and small multifamily, which would include townhomes, will range from 6 to 12 units to the acre. And we're presenting tonight a recommendation to change those numbers from 1 to 8 on the single-family detached, and on the single-family attached and small multifamily 8 to 16, so that we can get more in the range of what we're seeing for townhome development, but also look at slightly smaller lots for single-family detached projects. The other thing we would recommend is right now for the description of multifamily land uses, that doesn't include townhomes or row houses in the description of the uses. We would suggest to add those because they can be less dense than multifamily projects, and they may be a better fit in certain locations where we've shown multifamily as a recommended land use, but a townhome project might be a better fit. And this change to the uses for definition of what multifamily is would then allow the townhome development. So then if we do the other density changes from the previous slide, then we would say the average density of multifamily exceeds 16 units per acre. Yes, Diane.
I'm having a little difficulty with this.
Okay.
We just went through this 2 weeks ago with the 16-unit multifamily thing that was going to be, they were going to sell in the neighborhood of $400,000. And nowhere in there is $400,000 considered affordable.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand that you want to change the numbers, but how does that get anywhere close to providing affordable housing when I haven't seen anything come through here that was less than $400,000 on any development, including that developer's multi-apartment thing up there on Park Road?
And to tag on to that, because I guess, sorry. Well,
Okay.
Well, and I look at, Denver, and that they've implemented an affordable housing fee on all the permits. Is there an intent then to carry this through such that, maybe the county's going to designate affordable housing, desired areas and potentially collect fees? And because, it seems like there's got to be something tangible to make it actually happen, which would also mean that, people who are going to, if you had Colorado Land Trust come in, you'd have to have some more creative ways to either finance the land or it's leased or, all those deed restrictions for this to actually happen and get into those prices. So we understand this is kind of setting a baseline to allow that to happen, but is there any intent at the county to take it to the next step?
I don't know that I can speak for the county, but this is one thing we can do. I know the Community Resources Department in their plans talk about working with nonprofits or other foundations to get financing in place so that a builder is able to provide those affordable units. Now that's not anything that, the only thing that planning would be involved in is getting the application processed and approved, if you will. So there are a lot of other things that have to happen besides just this code amendment that the county isn't necessarily in control of. It can encourage, and it can, I don't know if we want to look at, I hate to suggest this, but just as an example, should we look at lowering landscaping requirements for these type of developments, anything to lower the cost of developing? We could be a facilitator with special districts about water and sewer taps, but that would only be advisory or making recommendations because the county doesn't control those types of things. The other thing we could do is adopt inclusionary housing requirements. A certain percent of this project has to be affordable housing at this income level. It's something we could do. I don't know if there's political will to do that.
I know that was part of the charter for both Forest City when they did Stapleton and Lowry Redevelopment Authority is they had to designate a certain percentage of the housing as income qualified. And So as a result, because I was in the community, their builders didn't get charged the affordable housing fee because the development had addressed it. But, if I go scrape a house in Hilltop, I have to pay an affordable housing fee so that further improves the stock. And it would seem to me maybe if the county wanted to look at maybe Prosper, trains left the station, but if you have a development with 5,000 plus housing units, it would seem like those would be good targets. So that it gets from the comp plan, to, a destination. Because right now, knowing what I do about comp plans and sub-area plans, I don't know where it's hospitable in the county, to actually make it happen to get affordable housing.
Yes.
Yeah. And one thing to remember is that if you do want to consider changing these numbers, that's just one aspect that comes before you with a rezoning. What does the comp plan say about this area? Okay, a density of maybe up to 16 units, but you still got compatibility criteria, setbacks, character, context, the amount of open space, parking, all that other stuff. I hate to say it, this is just a number. It's an important number, but it's only one factor to look at when you're looking at a PUD or a rezoning. So all that other stuff still has to be met.
That doesn't matter. You get to slice the pie a little bit more. When you look at water districts wanting to run a loop instead of a line, or any of the things that end up adding significant cost to your buildable land, density is obviously the way to distribute that.
Yeah. So just outlined a few options here for you to revise those descriptions per our recommendations presented tonight. You could revise the descriptions, but you could insert other density numbers. If you wanted to go higher on the townhome density, you could do that. Or you could create really maximum flexibility and not have any density limits on any of those types of projects, and just, see it when it comes in and judge it when it comes in the door.
And just to clarify on that, we're not talking about doing an administrative amendment. We're not looking for you to tell us, okay, staff, go ahead and change the plan. We're looking for some feedback on taking a proposed amendment to these densities through the comprehensive plan, the formal comprehensive plan process. So it would involve.
So we'd schedule a hearing. The earliest date we could accomplish that is October 15th. We'd send referrals and put notices on the website about this potential amendment, get as much public feedback as we could, then do what we need to do as a staff to get ready for the hearing and conduct that hearing. So we're not looking for this to be, go change those numbers and don't tell anybody. We want to make sure, and we may get positive feedback on these numbers as well.
I don't have a problem with the numbers, but let's not sugarcoat it and say the goal here is to help have more affordable housing in the county.
I don't.
Because you're not going to get it.
No, I think you're just going to end up with a developer with one or two more properties that they can sell at 400,000 plus.
Yeah.
That's the way I see any of that going.
Yeah. Well, and that's true. If people are going to sell at market rate, unless
it's going to
there's
be market pricing.
Unless there's some teeth.
That's right. Unless the feds come in and subsidize everything like we.
And I believe you do need to establish a basis for it, because otherwise you're going to have people saying that's not in the comp plan, And if you did get a legitimate, Habitat for Humanity or Colorado Land Trust coming in with a plan to actually accomplish that, you want to have a basis for them, But I think there's got to be a next step so that there's some teeth in the idea of getting affordable housing.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't take it out to the county and say, we want to do this, for public input, because this is our goal to provide affordable housing, because it's not going to do it.
You know, not in my backyard.
By itself.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's exactly it, right?
Yeah.
Seriously.
You can do it, just not in my neighborhood.
Yeah. I mean, everything is congested enough. Okay, seriously, and people are concerned about the congestion. So the only place to like build is where you guys live, out in no man's land, right?
Yeah.
Which.
You don't point an art at the table. You just keep it on your side.
Yeah.
Like, we have no water.
Well, they're not here.
Right.
There's no water here. No.
I just think the number, for what I've learned, the market drives what we look at. And we can't throw numbers, because I can tell you, when you get even at 60 ewes an acre, there are other problems that are created. It's not that simple. It's not, the density doesn't create the neighborhood. You know, it doesn't, I don't know what the answer is, but I don't think that, to me, makes it too limiting. Some things, I was on the Affordable Housing Task Force for Arapahoe County back in the early 80s. That's what I learned about Aurora, because we drove through every development and what makes it good and what isn't. And density, I know when you get to 40 DUs an acre, you really have a mess. They tried that down by Heritage Greens. That was one of the first really big battles. I don't know. I don't think it's that simple. I mean, I'm trying to think out in Strasburg. 16, we had that little one that came in just for a few units, and to me it was so out of character. I worry about putting it in print.
Well, and wasn't that going to be $350,000 for sale out in Strasburg?
Right. Yeah. And they were going to be that.
I mean, and you just thought, and it was right on the railroad
Right
track,
on the road.
between the railroad track and I-70.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I support the starting point. I just think there's got to be, you know, the political will to get it to the next level. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, if you're not prevented from selling a unit at market rate and doing really well with your development, you know, you're going to do it. And what makes some of these high density developments really work, like if you look at Lowry Boulevard 1, they shrank the lot size that they've been previously using. You know, they have a lot of 3,000, you know, for detached, 3,000, 4,000. The big houses are in 6,000 square feet. But, you know, they've created walkability. They have a store that's walking distance. They have a community park. So instead of putting it in people's yards, they've put it in more public space. So some of it has to be in either how the county addresses some of these developments that come in and, you know, requiring more of some of the developments that have the size to absorb it. Yeah, like, well, Casper, Sky Ranch, some of those folks are, you know, since they're not on the ground yet. But I guess, you know, it's like I've seen it done successfully, and they put income qualified housing next to custom homes, and it works. You know, so it can be done, but, you know, maybe we need to dig into some of those success stories a little bit and know how do you get from kind of defining it to making it happen.
I don't think cutting back on landscaping will help at all.
It was a bad example.
Yeah.
All I could come up with.
Yeah. We're public landscaping, less private.
And people have no green space, and there's 8 million people that they live next to.
They always need a place to
You have
walk
New
the
York
dog,
City.
and that gets lost.
Okay, so, and without Central Park.
Yeah, this is probably something we want to avoid. This is at 18.6 ewes per acre, but I think there's maybe a detention area, and that's about it for open space.
Well, that's really inventive streets. Yeah.
Yeah, this is another.
Is that off Mineral?
I'm not sure. These are little.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And they do actually have an open space park.
Yeah, that's right by there, yeah.
Yeah, taken out of context, but yeah. Yeah, this is one initial step. It may not net anything, but at least it provides an opportunity for builders to look at this, maybe work with CDBG folks and other foundations or nonprofits to
I don't.
make something happen.
I think if you just change the numbers, I don't think developer, and you say, I'm worried about how you try to sell it, and you change the numbers, and developers are gonna build something nice that costs over $400,000 a year. If it doesn't have any teeth in it, and nothing to help you reach the goal, it's just not gonna happen. So right now, give me something else that can make it a reality. Give me something with teeth.
Would you maybe be more comfortable if the increase in that density range above what it is today was tied to providing some percentage of affordable units?
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely. I think if it were defined that, to get this density, you have to have X percent of income qualified homes or something of that, to that effect. Because, it certainly does drive a developer's cost down to get the density. You're divvying up your infrastructure amongst more units. So if you have that requirement, then you might say, okay, these are on the prime location. I raise their price so that I can do this. But, and you can plan for it. But, it is an incentive that way.
Right.
But the example you gave, was that Lowry, you said, where it worked?
Lowry and Stapleton, they have income qualified housing directly adjacent to high-end single-family customers.
But what makes that work? I guess I'd like to see.
Well, I think it's the developers' requirements that it can't look like it is.
And needs to blend in.
The materials have to be high quality. It has to have the landscaping. So maybe for rent and maybe income qualified, but you're not going to know looking at it.
You can't go down the street and say,
Bell Creek was an early one.
Mm-hmm. I think if you go to Boulevard 1 and you drive down Archer Drive / Place, I don't think you could pick out which are the income qualified apartments and row homes from the others. Okay. Because they've made the materials very comparable. It just looks like, it's high density. So it can be done, and it was a requirement of the city for them to do what they wanted to do. So it needs to have teeth.
Another strategy for that is as the density goes up, this is going to sound a little contradictory, but as the density goes up, you allow lot size to reduce drastically, but it's coupled to an additional requirement that there's a common open space. Yeah, so you maybe perhaps lose landscape per unit, but then you install. Right, and that's one way to do it in, the county, unlike the city of Aurora being a city, has developers dedicate land that the city parks department takes over and manages after the developers build it. The county's open space department is not interested in becoming an urban parks department, but you could still do that in private hands.
Oh, absolutely. They do it. Well, they do it now in subdivisions. My subdivision has 3 parks that are ours, and they're not metro district ones. They're actually owned by
the HOA.
Yes.
Well, and, it also offers opportunity. For example, there are some energy efficient, programs or, technologies that if you have more common space, common tracks, like, for example, geothermal, in some locales, they've been able to do a common lease system that could serve multiple homes versus an individual home absorbing the cost of that type of system. So I think allowing some of that's why I've always been interested in cluster zoning, because there's some properties that are in my area, and we're like, that would be a great way to get another park and some green space without everybody being on these giant lots and no sidewalks. So, I definitely support a little more creativity that has less fenced yard and more green open space. That could also be a benefit to affordability.
So to break this down to something that the staff can use going forward,
that clears my
it's okay. Actually, it was quite clear, but I'm just trying to reduce the words down. You're saying you'd be interested. There is an interest across the Planning Commission for something that highlights common open space, even if it's at the expense of private fenced yard open space. That's interesting to you.
Yes, but I'm not sure. I don't know what it has to do with.
Understand the concern. It would be something we'd have to work on, and you would only allow people to target those higher number of units if they were also engaging in this other mechanism.
Or also, as Catherine said, to have a certain percentage of affordable housing in a higher density. It's like Denver. I mean, Denver.
Yeah, higher percentage to being income qualified to get the higher densities. So you want 2 more units per acre? Well, then those 2 have to be income qualified, or something to that effect.
Right.
I'm sure that there are probably some standards out there from other jurisdictions, but I think that to get the higher density, you have to do a little greater good.
Understood.
And we'll look at that on a case-by-case basis when the rezonings come in or whatever. This will just set a general framework for, I think, Jan's idea is great, to be considered for the upper limits, you need to provide this, this, and this.
It needs to be in writing.
Yeah.
It needs to be in writing. Just can't we change the numbers.
Okay.
Part of it is this. What Alan's asking is this would be the first step. There would definitely have to be a code amendment that fills in that detail, gives it the force of code.
Right. But I don't want to change the numbers and have the next person in the door going to 18 units at $450,000 or $500,000 a unit.
You need that.
So you almost need to concurrently change it so that you've got some code to back it up. It's like, sure, you can do that, but there's a catch.
Yeah,
page 5 - whatever it is.
I would take it to the planning commissioners and see if they care about affordable housing. I mean, I think it's important that they have this discussion too.
You mean the county commissioners
Yeah.
and the elected commissioners?
Yeah, those guys.
But it's your document.
I know, but
We do sometimes go to the Board of County Commissioners to get their input on changes related to the comprehensive plan. When we're in the update, we have to study sessions with them. So even though they're not decision makers, they can certainly provide that.
But they have the authority and they have the position to make this happen in Arapahoe County.
Correct,
and
yeah.
to make affordable
And then
housing
development
a reality.
So, do you want to have a hearing? Do you want to have another study session to review language? Or what's your pleasure?
That one.
I don't think we're quite ready for a public hearing.
I think I'd like to see another iteration.
Okay.
I'd like some more examples of what you said at Lowry and what that, I can look up what they really look like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
these don't tell you
What
much.
is that density? 16, 20?
200.
It's
condos.
20-story. Yeah.
20-story, like Spear Boulevard, with the $3,000 a month 1 bedroom, which is not affordable, but has amenities along Spear.
And it's high density.
High density, so it's,
Right.
So yeah, that's the
Couple
more.
of shipping containers for them.
Yeah.
If it's done well, it can work, and if it isn't, it's a detraction.
Yeah, then you wind up in public housing.
Right.
No, you want there to be dignity.
Right, you want to have some kind of ownership in.
Right.
Right.
Well, and people forget when you talk about income qualified, that could be your teachers, that can be your firefighters, it can be police. People get this
It's a wide
idea.
There's a wide range of working.
Someone making $80,000, $90,000 a year. Some of those units. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so.
Okay.
It's good.
We'll be back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I get a copy of your slides?
Sure.
Yeah, there.
Yeah. Would everybody?
Yeah, I would like to have a copy, yes.
Well, I'm glad to see it coming up, though. It needs to be discussed. Yeah, Bill, that looks like your desktop, all those little houses on it.
Well, you can't find anything in my house.
When I go and I plug it in tomorrow, they'll go back into The issue tonight was we had a last minute scramble in the 30 minutes I take at my desk. So this is zero funding, and that's there was that's just writing something we didn't even use.
You did well in New York City. So you probably figured out the big Jamie. Over there in the corner is our very newest commissioner. Oh, you know, yes.